more is always better, right? Our culture is constantly urging us to load up our lives with more and more. More information, more activities, more drama, more. The more information than ever in the history of mankind. And it's right there in the palm of your hand. We are obsessed with living an informed life instead of a transformed life. Too often, we are encouraged by society to fill up our lives with endless activities, sports, programs, church, school, work. But can we really do it all? There are overwhelming expectations placed on us to be a better person, parent, friend, spouse, employee, and boss. According to Jesus, we can end up living full lives and having an empty soul. In this series, we will fight the soul-crushing burdens of living life in overload.
That's a great riff. I just love that riff. Hey, welcome everybody to week number 4 of our series, Overload. We're concluding this series today. If you're in the loft, I want to welcome you guys joining us today. It was awesome to hang out with you guys a couple weekends ago. Man, hopefully we'll be able to do it again really soon. If you're watching from somewhere around the world on the internet, thanks for taking time and hanging out with us today. Now, we all know the story, right? Man, in our world, a lot of people are like, more. They turn on TV, more. We're just constantly being pushed. Load our lives with more and more. It's just the way it is. But sooner or later, if you keep overloading stuff, sooner or later, more turns into too much. And like overloaded ships, so many of our lives are just sinking. It is possible, according to Jesus, to have a very full life and still have a very empty soul, because God never intended for us to live overloaded lives. Our goal in this series is to learn how to offload the overload of some of today's most soul-crushing burdens. And today, I want to talk with you about expectation overload. Expectation overload. If you have a Bible, turn to Mark chapter 2, We'll be in the New Testament, second book, Matthew, Mark, second chapter. If you don't have a Bible, everything will be on the screen so we can move through the message. Do you want to challenge you to take some notes today? So in front of you in the seat back, paper and pen, use that. Or if you have the YouVersion Bible app, you can look up our notes for the live event, Colonial Church, and it should all be right there, and you can share it on social media. So we begin today. I'm curious, how many of you ever had somebody do this to you? They go, all right, now close your eyes and don't open them until I tell you you can. You ever had that happen? Let me see your hands. Yeah, many of you. Just imagine today, I'm like, okay, everybody close your eyes. And then let's imagine like I take you into a room, right? And I'm like, okay, eyes are closed. Don't open until I tell you. And I say, okay, this room is a honeymoon suite. And imagine you open your eyes and you find yourself in a cheap motel room. You'd be like, honeymoon suite? What a dump. But what do I say? Wait, no. Rather, instead, what if I brought you in a room and said, okay, this room is a jail cell. Now, open your eyes, and you open your eyes, you'd be like, ooh, and we're in a cheap motel room. You're like, ooh, nice place. The question, what made all the difference? Answer, our expectations. Few things in life have the capacity to shape everything about our lives like our expectations. Expectations are indeed very powerful. You say, well, how powerful? Well, one time, a while ago, a first-year college student, she wrote her parents a letter. This is the letter. She said, Dear Mother and Dad, it's been 3 months since I've left for college. I've been remiss in writing, and I'm very sorry for my thoughtlessness and not having written before. I will bring you up to date now, but before you read on, please sit down. You are not to read any further unless you're sitting down, okay? Well then, I'm getting along pretty well now. The skull fracture and the concussion I got when I jumped out of the window of the dormitory when it caught on fire shortly after my arrival, it's pretty well healed by now. I only spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and now I can see almost normally and only get the headaches about once a day. Fortunately, the fire in the dormitory and my jump was witnessed by an attendant in the gas station near the dorm, and he was the one who called the fire department and the ambulance. He also visited me in the hospital, and since I had nowhere to live because of the burnt-out dormitory, he was kind enough to invite me to share his apartment with him. It's really a basement room, but it's kind of cute. He's a very fine boy, and we've fallen deeply in love and are planning to get married. We haven't set the exact date yet, but it will be before my pregnancy begins to show. Yes, mother and dad, I am pregnant. I know how very much you're looking forward to being grandparents, and I know that you'll welcome the baby and give it the same love and tender care you gave to me when I was a child. The reason for the delay in our marriage is that my boyfriend has some minor infection, which prevents him and prevents us from passing premarital blood tests that I carelessly caught from him. But as soon as the penicillin cleans it up, we should be okay. I know you will welcome him into the family with open arms. He is kind. Although he's not very well educated, he is ambitious. Although he's of a different race and a different religion from ours, I know your oft-expressed tolerance will not permit you to be bothered by the fact that his skin color is somewhat darker than our own. I'm sure that you will love him as well as I do. Now that I brought you up to date, I want to tell you this. There was no dormitory fire. I did not have a concussion or a skull fracture. I was not in the hospital. I'm not pregnant. I am not engaged. I do not have syphilis. There's no immigrant boyfriend in my life. However, I am getting a D in sociology and an F in science, and I wanted to share these grades with you and put them in their proper perspective. Signed, your loving daughter. How powerful are expectations? Very powerful. The good news is that the right expectations can shape your life in the right way. Here's the bad news. The wrong expectations can shape your life in the wrong way. As we've said here many, many times, expectation and disappointment go hand in hand. The bottom line is it's really a matter of whose expectations will you live by. So if you've taken notes, you can write this. Here's where we're going to begin, right here. Here's our big idea. Write this down. The greatest freedom is living by God's expectations. The greatest freedom is living by God's expectations. Now help me out. Some of you, true or false, help me out. Some people live life like they've just got something to prove. True or false? It's true. There are a lot of people who are going through life, they got something to prove. And the reality is they're burdened by the expectations of others. So many people. Weighed down by what other people say you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be skinny. So we're weighed down with a burden of to be skinny. You're supposed to be successful. So we're weighed down by what that's supposed to look like. Or you're supposed to be smart. Or you're supposed to be fill in the blank. And the reality is so many of us are driven by what other people say and what other people think we are supposed to be. Let's just be honest. Many of us are unhappy because we're trying to be what other people are telling us we are supposed to be. There's an author, a British author and essayist by the name of Douglas Adams. He's a brilliant writer. He wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide. You know him from that book. Here's what he had to say. I'm going to put this up on the screen. These are powerful words. Here's what he said. He said, quote, "A life that is burdened with expectations is a heavy life. Its fruit is sorrow and disappointment." Does that sound familiar to anybody? A life burdened by expectations, a heavy life, fruit, sorrow, and disappointment. Throughout the month of July here in our church family, we gathered up cards from people in our church, hurt cards. And one of the number one sources of pain and hurt in our church family, one of the number one ones. I went through every single. We prayed over, by the way, every single card at least 50 times. I'm telling you, at least 50. One of the number one sources of pain, the expectations of other people. On the card, it just, maybe you remember, you prayed for them. On the card, it just simply says, "The hurt I've been carrying is." I'm just going to give you a quick sample. These are literally the words off the cards. I just took the words right off the cards. Here's some. "The hurt I've been carrying is," here's one, "living for the affirmation of people, never feeling like I'm good enough." Here's another one. "The hurt I'm carrying is not being able to live up to others' expectations. I try so hard, but I always fall short. I want to be a perfect dad, friend, and Christian. I want others to be proud of me." Here's another one. "The hurt I've been carrying is not being good enough, pretty enough, skinny enough." Hurts me. Here's another one. "Feeling inadequate in parenting." Whoever wrote that, I want to encourage you. By show of hands, some of you are parents and you feel inadequate in parenting. Welcome to the club. Here's another one. The hurt I've been carrying is not good enough. Constantly trying to impress others, but no one ever notices. The hurt I've been carrying is not ever being enough for either of my parents. Another one, the hurt I've been carrying is the picture that was painted for me of what a good wife and mother looks like. And then finally, this one, the hurt I've been carrying is not feeling worthy or good enough as a wife, a mother, sister, or a person. Listen, there is no burden heavier than the burden of the expectations of other people. So before we get too far, I just want to put some facts down. So here's the first one. Fact number one, you cannot live under the expectations of others and God at the same time. You can't do it. Here's a Bible verse for you. You can look it up later. It's Galatians 1:10 says this. Galatians 1:10 says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I'm still trying to please man, I would not be the servant of Christ." You can't live under the expectations of God and others at the same time. This takes me to fact number two. Once you place yourselves under the expectations of God, listen, you are free from the burden of the expectations of other people. This takes me to fact number three. There is really no greater happiness in life than having nothing to prove, having nothing to hide, and having nothing to lose. You say, well, how do you get there? Because that's where I want to be. Well, that's what we're going to learn today in Mark 2. We're going to learn directly from the example of Jesus Christ. Before we jump in, a little bit of background from Mark. Mark is the gospel. It shows us Jesus as the true king who has come to restore God's loving, wise, and liberating rule in the lives of people. And he does it one heart at a time. In Mark chapters 2 and 3, it's really one unit. And Mark gives to us 5 scenes in a row that are scenes where there's a clash between Jesus and the religious rulers of the day. It's really a clash of expectations. And so what we see in these 5 scenes is they try to dump their expectations on Jesus. But Jesus masterfully deals with a clash of expectations in a way that shows us how we can deal with the clash of expectations that we encounter in life. So in order to see how he did it, here's what we're going to do. I know this is kind of weird, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to work through the story backwards. We're going to start at the end of the story and see the punchline, and then we're going to work our way back to see how Jesus handled the expectations of others. And it's the story of a man named Matthew, Levi, and his friends and how they met Christ. So we're going to work our way back through that story and learn. Because here's the deal. What Jesus did, his followers do. He blazed a trail that is our path. We follow him. So if you're taking notes today, we say, well, how did Jesus order these expectations that come? First of all, if you're taking notes, you can write this down. How Jesus ordered expectations. Number one, God's matter most. God's matter. Every point up in the air. This point right there. That's where it goes. God's matter most. I'm curious, how many of you ever heard by show of hands of people pleaser? Can I see your hand? You ever an approval addict? You ever heard an approval addict? These are generally where you're dealing with like people who are just, they take their sense of, and they search for their sense of validation and worthiness from other people. Here's a question though. Is it possible to please enough people to have actually a lifetime of validation? Answer, no way. No way. You can please some people. You're going to please everybody. If, in fact, the best way to ensure a lifetime of misery, try to please other people and try to get your sense of validation from other people. It's a surefire way to a life of misery. In fact, I would say living according to the expectations of others, it's plain, flat out dangerous. Let me prove it to you. We're going to conduct a little experiment today. Okay, here's what we're going to do. In just a moment, we're all going to close our eyes together. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. And when I get to 3, we're all going to do this thing that I'm going to ask you to do. And when you do this thing that I ask you to do, you're not going to open your eyes till I tell you to open your eyes, okay? So here we go. Everybody close your eyes. Come on, close your eyes. Now, when I count to 3, everybody's going to point north. And you're going to keep your hand pointed north, okay? So here we go. Count to 3. Eyes stay closed. Keep them closed. 1, 2, 3. Everyone point north. Eyes are still closed. Keep them closed. Pointing north. Open your eyes. Look around. Where's everybody pointing? This guy that way, he's over there, she's over there, pointing north. Listen, I came in here the other day with a compass. True north is right over there. True north is right up, but look around. Everybody's like, some dude was over there, this chick's pointing that way. It's like, what's happening here? Why are we doing this? Here's why. If other people don't know where true north is, why in the world would you give them the authority to dictate who you're supposed to be? If they don't know which way north is, how are they going to know who you're supposed to be? As many people as there are is a different direction that we would point. We can't look to other people for true north, for validation. So here we are, Mark chapter 2, and a clash of expectations happens, and Jesus does what he does, and we can learn from it. So when the clash happens, what do we learn? We're in Mark chapter 2. I want to draw your attention to verse 17. Now again, we're at the end of the story. I know it's kind of odd. We're going to work our way back to the end of the story. Here's the clash of expectations. It says, and when Jesus heard it, the it is the clash of expectations. When he heard it, he said to them, those who were dumping expectations on him, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Let's get the scene now. Let's get into the scene here a little bit. Here's the scene. Jesus just called a tax collector named Levi, who also known as Matthew, but at this point his name is still Levi. He called him to come and follow him. So Levi's like, sure. So Levi opens up his house and throws a party for Jesus. And so now you got Levi and a bunch of his non-Christian, unchurched, irreligious, contaminated people, and Jesus is at their house and they're all hanging out. And then the religious rulers, they hear about this. And so they come and they blast Jesus for not living up to their expectations of what a holy man's supposed to do. Holy man don't hang out with dirty sinners. Jesus did. And it bothered them. So what happens? They attempt to dump their bags on Jesus. And as soon as they jump their expectations on Jesus, he's like, whoa, I'm not picking that up. No. Think about it. Imagine, Jesus would not allow other people to tell him who he's supposed to be. He would not allow other people to tell him how he's supposed to be. He would not allow other people to tell him what he was supposed to do. How freeing is this? How freeing is this? He's brushed off the expectations of others. How did he do it? Well, notice at the end of verse 17, he said, I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Listen, Jesus understood what God called him to do. He understood God sent him into the world to be like a great physician who heals the sick and wounded and broken lives of sinful people. He didn't come to meet the expectations of religious people. And let me say this, the more religious you are, the more irrelevant Jesus will be to you. But the more broken you are, the more relevant he will be to you. And so he comes along, and they want him to dance their dance, and he's just not going to do it. He did not come to meet their expectations. Newsflash. When you know who you're not, you're free to be what God called you to be. Jesus says, I know who I'm not. I'm not that. I'm not doing that. Wow. This is awesome. Jesus ordered his life, my friends, under the expectations of God. God called me to do that. That's what I'm going to do. I don't care what you say about it. Let me ask you, is that you? Does that describe you? Like, let me ask you, how do you measure your validation? Because I think, honestly, many of us here, we're living in such a way that we're trying to prove something to somebody. Somebody may not even be around. It could be a deceased parent or a distant loved one or a previous authority figure or something, a boss currently or a friend or spouse. The good news is that your validation, it's not determined by other people. It's determined by God. And here's the thing. Most people don't know which way true north is. How are you going to look to other people to tell you who you're supposed to be? You open the pages of Scripture, you will see true north of who God is and how he made you, what he made you to be, and who Christ is, and what Christ can transform you into. That's true north. I was so waiting for somebody in the room to just do that for true north. Which way's north? That way. Okay, fair enough. I want to offer you a guilt-relieving statement. Here it is. If you belong to Jesus Christ, you've got nothing to prove to anybody. If you belong to Jesus Christ, you've got nothing to hide from anybody, and you've got nothing to lose to anybody. You're free and clear. Living under God's expectations, that's what it looks like. That's how it works. Following Christ puts you under the expectations of God and free from the expectations of others. Thank you, God. A scholar by the name of Dr. R.T. Kendall put it this way, and I'll put this up on the screen. Here's what he said. He said, quote, the more conscious of God's presence, the more I feel like being myself. The less conscious of his presence, the more I feel the need to prove myself. Totally relate with that. Maybe you do too. How Jesus ordered expectations. First of all, number one, God's matter most. You got to get that thing right. God's matter most. Second of all, critics matter least. Delete. Critics matter least. By show of hands, how many of you agree with this statement? Criticism hurts. You see your hands? Man, it hurts. I don't care who you are, it hurts. I don't care how you pretend, it hurts. One of these little publications I love to read, some of you may have read it. If you haven't, let me introduce you to a treat. Some of you will laugh just hearing it. Deep Thoughts from Jack Handey. If you've never read Deep Thoughts, they're just a hilarious string of one-liner observations. They're just funny. And here's what Jack Handey had to say about criticism. He said, quote, before you criticize someone, you should walk a mile in their shoes. That way, when you criticize them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes. That's how you do it. Truth is, criticism always hurts, and life is filled with people who want to load it onto you. What are you going to do? Now, newsflash, my friends, medical researchers have discovered something interesting, that negative expectations will affect you in a negative way, big time. There's such a thing that they've discovered called the nocebo effect. You've heard of the placebo effect, the nocebo effect. Literally, it's patients who go into medical procedures or treatments with a low sense of expectations receive lower results than people who go in with a high expectation for success. Even when the exact same procedures are highly rated for success, scientifically verified for high rates of success, they still get lower numbers because their expectations were low. Isn't that ridiculous? Like, it turns out you get what you expect. How dangerous then are expectations? You got to be careful which expectations you allow into your life. Jesus dealt with the negative expectations of others. Let's see what he did. We're in Mark chapter 2. Notice verse 16. Goes on. Actually, it doesn't go on. It goes up. We're working back. Remember, we're coming back through. 2:16 says, and the scribes of the Pharisees, when they saw that he was eating with sinners and tax collectors, said to his disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? Notice this phrase, why. They're like, why? Why does he eat? The religious rulers had a long tradition, listen, a long tradition of not eating with sinners. Now, the New Testament era, we see the Pharisees. The Old Testament, when it ends, there ain't no Pharisees. So between the Old Testament and New Testament, they emerged. That period is known by scholars as Second Temple Judaism. Second Temple Judaism had a theology behind it which shaped the Pharisees. Here's two little samples of their tradition that they grew up in. Here's the first one. It's Tobit, chapter 4, verses 16 and 17. Here's what they grew up in. It says, quote, give some of your food to the hungry, but give none of it to sinners. Then who are you going to feed, I wonder? Only your friends, I suppose. Here's another authority. Quote, this is from Jubilees 22:16. Separate yourself from Gentiles, it's non-Jews. Separate yourself from Gentiles and do not eat with them. All their ways are contaminated. This is the operating system of the Pharisees' worldview. And they expected Jesus to be like that. He's like, nah. Not at all. I'm a physician for sick people. I will hang out with sick people. Remember, Jesus put himself under God's expectations, which meant he was free from theirs. Now listen, if you want to live under the expectations of God, newsflash, others won't like it. They will criticize you. You want to live for God? Those that might not really be living for God in the way that you're trying to live for God are going to criticize you for it. Remember, criticism hurts. Like Jesus, if you live under God's expectations, two things will happen. It's right from the text. I didn't put it in your notes, but you can follow along. Two things will happen. Two things. First of all, you'll be watched. Notice it says that when they saw he was eating with sinners. The Greek tense of this, when they saw, literally is, and they were seeing. It's an ongoing, continuous thing. The Pharisees were always giving Jesus the side eye. They were always giving him the stink eye, the evil eye, always eyeballing Jesus. Listen, you want to live for God? Others will be watching you. Not in show me the way, but more like a stink eye, side eye, evil eye coming your way. You'll be watched. Second thing, you'll be talked about. You'll be talked about. Notice it says they saw him, but also says, and they said to his disciples. They said to us, notice they didn't say anything to Jesus. Their problems with Jesus, and they don't talk to him, they talk about him. So will your critics. You want to live for God? Don't be shocked if people are talking about you and the way you live for God and how it's not like they live for God, therefore it's wrong and you're wrong. Let me be honest. Many of us here, to be very honest, are carrying the criticisms of others. Here's why. Because we care more about the approval of people than we do the approval of God. The only way you can be truly devastated by the criticisms of others is if their approval is your salvation. But if you live for the approval of others, you'll be enslaved to the approval of others. But if you live for the approval of God, you will be liberated by the approval of God from the burden of the expectations of other people and their criticisms. One wise preacher put it this way. I put it up on the screen because I want you to see this. Here's what he said. An old wise preacher put it this way. He said, quote, "Who cares about the approval of slaves when you have the honor of the king?" Who cares? Jesus ordered expectations. First of all, God's matter most. Second of all, critics matter least. And third, if you're taking notes, others come after God's. Others come after God's. Let's get real. We're in church, so you can't lie, or lightning bolts are coming your way. Here's the deal. How many of you, by show of hands, have ever felt in a deep way like a failure? Can I see your hands? It could be maybe your parents told you you were one growing up. It could be that an authority figure said that you were one. It could be that someone you cared about made you feel like one. However that happened, the reality is many of us are living for the expectations of others for fear of rejection. Let me make a confession. I hate rejection. It hurts. I hate it. Let me say this. But I don't hate rejection more than I love the acceptance of God through Christ. In fear of rejection, living for the expectations of others is a very dominant thing in the lives of so many who are being weighed and burdened. So, Jesus is our example of what do you do with human beings with whom you relate who have expectation. What do you do? Two simple things. I know it sounds kind of funny. Why don't you write these down? Two things Jesus did with people that we should do with people. These like, if you do these two things, stuff's going to change. First thing, we'll call this first one invitation to relationship. Invitation to relationship. Verse 15. Remember, we're working our way back to the beginning. It says, and as he reclined at the table in his house, which is Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were reclining with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. Notice the word recline there occurs a couple times. Recline. What's recline? Well, back in the first century, they didn't put chairs around tables to eat. The table was on the floor. So people would literally lean on one arm, your head would be near the table, you'd eat this way, your feet would go back the other, recline. Jesus was literally kicking back with a whole bunch of people who are referred to as sinners and tax collectors. In fact, 3 times they're called that. Verse 15, sinners and tax collectors. 16, sinners, tax collectors. 16, sinners and tax collectors. In their day, this is why the religious leaders got so fired up. Sharing a meal with people meant inclusion of that people with you. It meant they belong with you. It means accepting these people. And as we all know, when you eat with people, 2 things come on the table other than food. Honesty and vulnerability. Sit around a table with food, we're going to get there. Add a little wine, you get there quicker. But that's what happens. Invitation to relationship. Now, all through the New Testament, the kingdom of God is described in terms of a feast, all throughout. And so Jesus' table fellowship is a demonstration that the king is here and the kingdom is here and all are invited. It doesn't matter how rejected you were by anybody else, you are all invited at the table. And this is what he's doing. Those who were labeled as rejects were accepted and received by Jesus, welcomed into the invitation to relationship under the loving, wise, liberating rule of God. So, newsflash, my friends. Because Jesus lived under the expectations of God, he was free to do something that many of us I don't think we're free to do. He was free to love and serve real sinners. If you live under the expectations of God, you'll be free to love real sinners, not sinners in the abstract, sinners on paper, real sinners, like they smell and talk. Like, does that describe your relationships right now? Forget the homeless guy, the person across the table in your home, the child, the spouse, the one in the mirror, the real sinner, actual ones. When we live under the expectations of God, we are suddenly freed to love and serve actually sinful people. We love others best when God's expectations matter most. So what did Jesus do with the people that came his way? Well, invitation to relationship, these go together. Invitation to relationship, second thing, you can write this down, second thing, invitation to relationship, challenge to change. Invitation to relationship, challenge to change. Notice in verse 14 here at the beginning, it says, then as he passed by, Jesus, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting in a tax booth, and he said to him, follow me. And he rose, and he followed him. Now notice the name Levi here, Levi. His story picks up here, but Jesus doesn't. Long ago, Jesus said, I have come not to call the righteous, but the sinner. He made that. He got under God's expectations long before this scene. And because he did that, he went around looking for sinners to call. And he found one. His name is Levi. Let's talk about his name. Levi's name is the name of one of the tribes of Israel. It's the tribe where the priests come from, those who serve God. Is he a priest serving God? No. He's a tax collector. So he does not live up to his name. He's a Jewish man who's collecting taxes for the Roman occupying government. He's a thief to his countrymen. He's a traitor, and he's a social outcast. He's a reject in every sense of the word. And Jesus comes along and invites him to follow. Twice we see it, follow me, and then he follows him. What happens then? Levi follows Jesus and then becomes Matthew, the writer of the Gospel of Matthew. Levi's name somehow turns into Matthew. Matthew means gift of God. Question: how does a rip-off artist, reject, become a gift to others? Answer: through invitation to relationship and challenge to change. Through invitation to relationship and challenge to change. This is what Jesus did with people. This is what we do with people, with all people. Rather than living up to the expectations of others, listen, here's the difference. We lift people up to the expectations of God. We don't dump on them, we lift them. We help, we enable, we call forth. Invitation to relationship, challenge to change. About 500 years ago, totally true story, you can look it up, a great marble stone was dragged from a city called Carrara, Italy, all the way to Florence, Italy. Giant marble stone. The sculptor Donatello was hired to get a marble stone and to make a sculpture of a famous Old Testament prophet. When this particular marble stone was dragged from Carrara all the way to Florence, Italy, he came and checked it out, saw imperfections in it, didn't like it, and rejected it. So they took it and dumped it in a cathedral yard and left it. Then one day, another sculptor came along, and he looked at it, and he caught sight of it, and he saw what it could become. So we went to work. 2 full years of hard work. True story. On January 25th, 1504, in the presence of the greatest artists of the day, in presence were Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, Pietro Perugino, and Raphael, greatest of the time. When the veil was dropped and the curtain came down and the sculpture was revealed, to this day, is one of the finest pieces of art, one of the greatest sculptures ever created, Michelangelo's David. Look it up on the internet and look at the detail in the face and the hands and the fingers. Michelangelo's David was sculpted from a rejected piece of stone. If Michelangelo can take a rejected piece of stone and turn it into a thing of beauty, imagine what Jesus can do with you. If only you let him. How do I live up to the expectations of God? Let him go to work on you. Just let him go to work on you. C.S. Lewis in the book Mere Christianity, I think he summed it all up. Put it this way, quote, God is easy to please, but hard to satisfy. All he wants is to go to work on you, and he won't be satisfied until you become exactly what he intended for you to become. Nothing more, nothing less, and definitely nothing else. Let's pray together. Father, as we open the scriptures and we see Jesus, we notice we are looking directly at you and your heart and your character, that you are the God who loves us. You are the God who seeks us, who calls out to us, who invites us, who challenges us, who empowers us, who transforms us into that which we were meant to become. Our prayer today, God, is have your way. Have your way in us today. Get to work on whatever you need to get to work. Hammer, chisel. God, make us into what we were always meant to be. Heads bowed and eyes closed as we close our time together. There's some of you here today, the truth is, you've been burdened down by the expectations of other people. You feel it. There's some of you here today, your whole life, you've just been trying to prove something to someone. There's some of you here today that you feel rejected. You feel rejected because you just can't live up to anyone's standards, let alone your own even. And God brought you here today because he wants to lift that burden. He wants to be God to you. Jesus Christ, the great physician, he's the one who heals. If you're here today and your prayers, you know what, God, I want to live under your expectations. I want to be free. If that's your prayer, raise your hand. Go ahead and do it because I want to pray for you. God, as hands go up around this room, I pray that you would get to work in our hearts, God. That those of us, as we belong to you, as we call upon Christ, that you would fill us with your Spirit and cause us to know that you are making us into what we were meant to become, not by living for the expectations of others, but by living under yours. God, our prayer is that you would set us free, that we would so live for you in such a way that we would be free to love and serve the actual people that we encounter in this life that you have given to us. As we continue praying today, heads bowed, eyes closed, there's somebody here today, the truth is, you're that rejected stone. You're the one who's been rejected by a lot of people. And you feel like maybe God might have rejected you for the things that you have done, or maybe even the things that are done to you. But listen, Jesus Christ is the great physician. He did not come to call righteous people. He came to call people like me and people like you, broken, sin-sick, hurting people, to come home to him and find healing and hope and life. If you're here today and you sense you're not right with God and you're ready to be, getting right with God is simple as ABC. A, admit you're a sinner, you need a Savior. B, believe on Jesus, that he died on the cross for your sins and he rose from the grave to give you new life. And C, call upon him. Scripture says whoever calls on Jesus will be saved. That means forgiven. It means that God's Spirit will come into your life and make you a new person starting right then and there. And for the rest of your life, he'll be working on you, transforming you into the person you were meant to be. You'll be adopted into God's family starting right here, right now, and he will never leave you, never forsake you. And all begins right here. For some of you, this moment contains all moments for you. It's the moment to step into a relationship with Christ, to step into the table, to allow him to put his arm around you and begin to heal you as his own. If you're here today and you just say, I want to belong to you, Christ. I want you to heal me. I want you to forgive me. I want you to get to work on my life and make me into the person that I was intended to be. Then you can just pray with me and say, Dear God, I am a sinner and I do need a Savior. And Jesus, I believe that you died on the cross for my sins and you rose from the grave to give me new life. And right now, I call upon you. I ask you to forgive my sins, to come into my life, to fill me with your Spirit, and to make me new. I give my life to you. And I pray, God, that you would go to work on me. Make me into the person that I was meant to become under your hand. For it is in Jesus' name that I pray. And everybody said, amen and amen. Let's celebrate together with those who are calling on Christ today, because it's a good day.